Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I'm 17, a junior at Westfield High, and 3 months ago I made what I thought was a simple decision, cutting ties with Jessica, my best friend since 8th grade. We'd been inseparable for years, but her jealousy had gotten completely out of control. She'd show up at my part-time job at the local coffee shop without warning, getting visibly upset when I'd chat with customers or laugh with coworkers. If I mentioned hanging out with other friends, she'd go silent for days, then bombard me with passive-aggressive texts about how I was replacing her. The final straw came when she started following me around school, literally trailing behind me in the hallways like some kind of shadow. When I confronted her about it, she just stared at me with this blank expression and said she was making sure I was okay. That's when I knew I had to end it. The breakup wasn't pretty. I tried to be gentle about it, explaining that I needed some space and that her behavior was making me uncomfortable. But Jessica didn't take it well at all. She started crying in the middle of the school cafeteria, saying I was abandoning her and that I was her only real friend. Other students were staring and I felt terrible, but I also felt this huge wave of relief. For the first time in months, I could breathe without worrying about her showing up somewhere unexpected or getting mad about some innocent interaction I'd had with someone else. I blocked her number, unfriended her on social media, and tried to move on with my life. For about 2 weeks, everything felt normal again. I should have known it wouldn't last. The messages started on Instagram. A blank profile with no photo, username just a string of random numbers, sent me a DM at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Nice jacket today. Red really suits you. I'd worn my red bomber jacket to school that day. It was my favorite, and I'd gotten compliments on it from a few people. At first, I figured it was just someone from school being friendly, maybe too shy to use their real account. But then I realized how many people really pay that much attention to what I wear, and why message me anonymously about it. I screenshot the message to show my mom, but decided to ignore it. Maybe they'd just move on. 3 days later, another message came through. Your dog is adorable. Bella, right? She loves those tennis balls you throw for her in the backyard. My entire body went cold. Bella was my golden retriever, and I did play fetch with her in our backyard almost every day after school. But our yard was completely fenced in, surrounded by tall wooden panels. The only way someone could see us playing was if they were deliberately watching from the alley behind our house. I immediately showed the messages to my parents. My dad checked all our doors and windows, making sure everything was locked tight. My mom suggested I report it to the school, but what could I really say? Someone complimented my jacket and knew my dog's name? It felt serious to me, but I knew how it would sound to adults. We decided to keep an eye on things and see if it continued. Part of me wondered if it was Jessica. She'd been to my house countless times, knew Bella well, had seen me in that jacket 100 times. But the Instagram account that was messaging me had been created recently, and Jessica wasn't exactly tech-savvy. She could barely figure out how to post a story, let alone create some elaborate anonymous harassment campaign. Still, the timing felt too convenient. 2 weeks after our friendship ended, and now this. I tried to push the suspicion away, but it kept creeping back into my mind every time I looked at those messages. The messages kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. A week later, you always order the same thing at lunch. Turkey sandwich, no mayo, extra pickles, predictable. Then, your locker combination is 182407, same as your birthday, not very creative. That one made my skin crawl because it was absolutely correct. My birthday was August 18th, 2007, and yeah, I'd used those numbers for my locker combination. But tons of people at school could have seen me opening my locker, could have figured out the pattern. The messages were coming from different accounts now, all blank profiles with random number usernames, all created within days of each other. Whoever was doing this was getting bolder, more detailed. They knew I walked home from school every Tuesday and Thursday when I didn't have work. They knew I always stopped at the corner store on Maple Street to buy a Coke and a bag of chips. They even knew about the tiny scar on my left hand from when I'd cut myself making dinner last year. Something I'd only told 2 people about. One was my mom, the other was Jessica. My parents finally agreed to take it seriously when the messages started coming to my phone number. I'd never given my number to any of these anonymous accounts, but somehow they had it. The texts were simple but terrifying. Sweet dreams, Chloe. Hope you slept well. Your bedroom window faces the backyard, doesn't it? I stopped sleeping with my curtains open. I started keeping my phone on silent at night because the messages would come at all hours. 3 a.m., 4 a.m., sometimes as late as 5 a.m. My parents contacted the police, but they said unless the messages contained direct threats, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I document everything, which I was already doing, screenshotting every single message. The officer who came to our house was nice enough, but I could tell he thought it was probably just some kid playing pranks. He didn't understand the level of detail in these messages, how intimate the knowledge was. This wasn't random. This was personal. Then the messages turned darker. You think you're so much better than everyone else? You ruined everything. You'll pay for what you did. The tone shifted from creepy observation to pure hatred, and that's when I knew for certain it had to be Jessica. The phrasing sounded exactly like the things she'd said to me during our last fight. But when I mentioned this to my parents, they reminded me that Jessica was just a 17-year-old girl, not some criminal mastermind. How could she have gotten my phone number when I'd blocked her everywhere? How was she creating all these fake accounts? My dad suggested maybe she had help, maybe other friends who were angry about our friendship ending. But Jessica didn't really have other close friends. That had been part of the problem. She'd been completely dependent on me for social interaction, which is why she'd gotten so possessive in the first place. The mystery was driving me crazy, but the fear was worse. I started checking locks obsessively, looking around corners, jumping at every unexpected sound. The threats became more specific about 2 weeks later. I know where you work. I know where you live. I know how to hurt you. And then the one that made me physically sick. I know about Bella. Dogs are so fragile, aren't they? I showed that message to my parents immediately, and my dad called the police again. This time they took it more seriously because it was a direct threat against our pet. They said they'd increase patrols in our neighborhood and suggested we install security cameras. My mom took time off work to be home with me after school, and we started bringing Bella inside during the day instead of letting her roam the backyard. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly aware that someone was watching, waiting, planning. The worst part was not knowing for sure who it was. Every time I saw Jessica at school, I studied her face for any sign of guilt or satisfaction, but she just looked sad and tired. She'd lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes, and barely spoke to anyone. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part wondered if it was all an act. 3 days after that last threat, I came home from school to find my mom waiting in the driveway with tears streaming down her face. She didn't say anything, just grabbed my hand and led me to the backyard. Bella was lying on her side near the fence, whimpering softly. Her left hind leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and there was blood matted in her golden fur. My mom had already called the vet, and we rushed her to the emergency clinic. The vet said it appeared she'd been deliberately injured. Her leg was broken in 2 places, and she had several deep cuts that looked like they'd been made with a knife or sharp tool. The injuries were too precise, too intentional to be accidental. Someone had hurt my dog on purpose. While we waited for Bella to come out of surgery, I sat in that sterile waiting room and felt pure rage building inside me. This had gone too far. Whoever was doing this had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. My sweet, innocent dog had been tortured because of some sick game. The police treated it as a serious crime this time. They dusted our fence for fingerprints, searched the backyard for evidence, and interviewed neighbors to see if anyone had seen anything suspicious. One neighbor, Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down, mentioned she'd seen a figure in dark clothing climbing through the alley behind our house around noon, right when I was at school and my mom was at work. But she was elderly and couldn't make out any details about the person's size or gender. The officer investigating asked if I had any enemies, anyone who might want to hurt me or my family. I told him about Jessica, about our friendship ending, about the anonymous messages. He took notes and said they'd look into it, but I could tell he was skeptical. Jessica was a slight girl, barely 5 feet tall, and the idea of her climbing fences and attacking a 50-pound dog seemed far-fetched. But I knew in my gut it was connected. The timing was too perfect, the escalation too calculated. Someone was systematically terrorizing me, and now they'd proven they were willing to hurt innocent animals to get to me. That night I couldn't sleep. Bella was staying overnight at the vet clinic, and the house felt empty without her gentle snoring from the foot of my bed. Around 1 a.m., I heard my phone buzz with a text message. Against my better judgment, I checked it. The message was from another new number. Poor Bella. I hope she recovers quickly. It would be such a shame if something worse happened to her, or to you. I screenshot it immediately and forwarded it to the detective handling our case. But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, something clicked in my mind. The phrasing, the timing, the intimate knowledge, it all suddenly made perfect sense. The next morning, I did something I should have done weeks ago. I asked my dad to help me check Jessica's older brother, Tyler. He was 21, worked at a tech company, and had always been creepy around me when I'd visited their house. He'd know everything Jessica knew about me, would have the technical skills to create fake accounts, and would definitely be strong enough to hurt Bella. More importantly, he'd always resented me for taking up so much of Jessica's time. When the police ran his name, they found he'd been arrested twice for stalking ex-girlfriends. Within 48 hours, they had enough evidence to arrest Tyler. He'd been sloppy, using his home Wi-Fi to create the fake accounts, and security footage from the corner store showed him following me on multiple occasions. When they searched his room, they found detailed notes about my daily routine, photos of me and Bella taken from the alley behind our house, and drafts of messages he'd planned to send. Jessica was devastated when she found out. She came to my house crying, apologizing over and over for her brother's actions. She had no idea he'd been doing any of it, and the guilt was eating her alive. Tyler was charged with stalking, harassment, and animal cruelty. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in prison plus mandatory counseling. Bella recovered fully, though she's never quite as trusting of strangers as she used to be. The whole experience changed me too. I'm more careful about who I trust, more aware of my surroundings, and I never take my safety for granted anymore. But I'm also grateful it's over, and that the truth finally came out before things got even worse. Never thought I'd be the type to share something like this on the internet, but here we are. I'm a 28-year-old elementary school teacher living in a quiet town in Ohio, and what happened to me last year still gives me chills when I think about it. At the time all this started, life was pretty routine. I'd just gotten my tenure at Maplewood Elementary, was dating this amazing guy named Kevin who worked at the local bank, and honestly felt like I had everything figured out. I lived in this cute little duplex on Elm Street with my cat Whiskers, had a small but close group of friends, and spent most of my evenings grading papers or binge-watching Netflix. Nothing too exciting, but I was content. I'd grown up in this same town, graduated from the local high school 10 years earlier, and while some people found small-town life boring, I loved the predictability of it all. Everyone knew everyone, and drama was usually limited to who was dating whom or whose dog got loose again. The whole nightmare started on a random Wednesday in March when I got a Facebook message from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Brandon Mitchell. We dated briefly during our senior year of high school, and by briefly, I mean like 3 weeks of awkward teenage romance before we both realized we had absolutely nothing in common. He was this quiet, intense kid who spent most of his time in the computer lab or playing those fantasy card games during lunch. I remembered him as being sweet but clingy, always wanting to hold hands in the hallways and getting jealous when I talked to other guys, even just friends. After we broke up, he'd tried to get back together a few times, but I was already focused on college applications and moving on with my life. I hadn't heard from him since graduation, and honestly, I'd completely forgotten he existed until that message popped up on my phone while I was making dinner. The message was simple enough, just, "Hey Amber, how have you been? Saw your profile and thought I'd say hi." Seemed harmless, right? I should have trusted my gut and ignored it completely. Against my better judgment, I replied. Just basic small talk. Told him I was teaching, asked what he was up to. He said he was working in IT for some company in Columbus, about an hour away from my town. The conversation stayed light for the first few days, catching up on mutual friends, reminiscing about high school teachers we both remembered. He seemed normal, maybe a little too eager to keep the conversation going, but nothing that raised any red flags. He'd message me every morning with "Good morning, beautiful," and every night with "Sweet dreams," which felt a bit much for someone I hadn't spoken to in a decade. But I figured maybe he was just being friendly. I mentioned Kevin once, casually, when Brandon asked if I was seeing anyone. His response was weird. Just "oh," followed by a long pause. Then he changed the subject completely. That should have been warning sign number 1, but I brushed it off. I was being polite, nothing more, and I figured the conversation would naturally fizzle out after a few more days. But it didn't fizzle out. Instead, Brandon started getting more personal, asking about my daily routine, what time I got home from work, if I lived alone. When I kept my answers vague, he'd find ways to circle back to the same questions later. He started commenting on every single thing I posted on Facebook, photos, status updates, even when I'd check in at the grocery store or the gym. The comments weren't inappropriate exactly, but they were constant and oddly specific. Like when I posted a photo of my coffee one morning, he commented, "Looks like you're at that little cafe on Main Street again. You always did love their blueberry muffins." The thing is, I'd never mentioned loving blueberry muffins, not in our recent conversations or back in high school. It was such a random, specific detail that it made me pause. How did he even remember that? Or worse, how did he know I still went there? I started paying more attention to his comments after that, and they all had this same quality. Too detailed, too observant, like he was keeping track of patterns in my life that even I didn't realize I had. The first physical sign that things were escalating came on a Friday afternoon in late April. I got home from work to find a small package on my porch. No delivery truck in sight, no return address, just a brown paper bag with my name written on it in neat handwriting. Inside was a small, succulent plant in a ceramic pot, the kind I'd posted about wanting to buy for my classroom just a few days earlier on Instagram. There was a note attached. "Thought you might like this for your garden. B." My heart started racing because I'd never given him my address. I lived in a duplex on a quiet street, and while it wasn't exactly hidden, you'd have to know where to look. I immediately called my landlord to ask if anyone had been asking about me, but he said no. That night I went through all my social media accounts, checking what information was public, but my address wasn't listed anywhere. I even asked my neighbor if she'd seen anyone drop off the package, but she'd been at work all day. The whole thing made me incredibly uneasy. But when I confronted Brandon about it through message, he acted like it was no big deal. "Found your address in the phone book," he said. "Thought you'd appreciate the gesture." Except our town hadn't had a physical phone book in years, and I wasn't listed in any online directories. That weekend, Kevin came over for dinner, and I told him about the plant and the weird messages. He didn't seem overly concerned at first, said it was probably just some guy trying to reconnect who didn't understand boundaries. But then I showed him all the Facebook comments, the messages, the specific details Brandon kept mentioning about my daily life. Kevin's expression changed completely. He's this calm, level-headed guy who never gets worked up about anything, but I could see the concern in his eyes as he scrolled through the messages. "This isn't normal, Amber," he said quietly. "This guy is clearly watching you somehow." We decided I should block Brandon on all social media platforms, which I did that night. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought cutting off his access to my online presence would make him lose interest and move on. I was so incredibly wrong about that. The blocking just made him angry, and what happened next made me realize I was dealing with someone who had absolutely no intention of respecting my boundaries. The real terror was just beginning. 3 days after I blocked him, I found another package on my porch. This time it was a framed photo of me and Brandon from our high school prom, a photo I didn't even remember taking. We weren't prom dates. We'd already broken up by then. But apparently someone had snapped a picture of us talking by the punch bowl. In the photo, I was laughing at something, completely unaware the picture was being taken. But Brandon was staring directly at me with this intense expression I'd never noticed before. The frame was expensive looking, silver with intricate engravings, and there was another note. "I've kept this all these years. We look so happy together. Why won't you talk to me anymore?" The fact that he'd held on to this random photo for 10 years, had it professionally framed, and was now leaving it on my porch made my skin crawl. I took pictures of everything and called the police, but they said without any direct threats there wasn't much they could do. "It's just gifts," the officer said. "Weird gifts, but not illegal." I wanted to scream. How was this not considered harassment? That same day, I got a call from my principal saying that someone had called the school asking detailed questions about my schedule, what time I arrived, when I left, which classroom I taught in. The secretary had refused to give out the information, but it was clear Brandon was escalating his surveillance. The anonymous messages started the next week. Kevin began getting texts from unknown numbers, always sent late at night, always vaguely threatening. "She doesn't really love you," one said. "You're just a placeholder until she realizes who she's meant to be with." Another, "Enjoy your time with her while you can. It won't last much longer." The messages were never overtly threatening enough to warrant police action, but they were persistent and clearly designed to mess with Kevin's head. He showed me every single one, and I could see how much they were affecting him. Kevin had never been the jealous type, but these messages were making him paranoid and suspicious. He started asking me questions about my past with Brandon, wanting to know details about our relationship that I'd never thought were important. The worst part was that Brandon somehow knew things about Kevin too. His full name, where he worked, even his car model. One message referenced Kevin's blue Jeep Cherokee, which made us both realize that Brandon had been watching us together. He knew what Kevin looked like, what he drove, probably where he lived. The feeling of being constantly observed was suffocating, like having invisible eyes following my every move. By June, the situation had completely taken over my life. I'd changed my phone number twice, but somehow Brandon always found the new one within days. He'd call at random hours, never saying anything, just breathing into the phone before hanging up. I stopped posting anything on social media, made all my accounts private, even deleted my Instagram entirely, but the packages kept coming. Flowers, books, jewelry, always with those handwritten notes that got progressively more disturbing. "I know you're ignoring me, but I won't give up on us," one said. "We're meant to be together, and deep down you know it too." The gifts started appearing in places that should have been secure, tucked under my car windshield wiper in the school parking lot, left in my mailbox despite the fact that it was technically federal property, even placed inside my classroom somehow. That last one really shook me. I'd locked my classroom door when I left for lunch, and when I came back, there was a small music box on my desk playing our old prom song. The janitor swore he hadn't let anyone in, and the principal confirmed that no visitors had been logged during lunch period. How was Brandon getting into my workplace? I started staying late at school just to avoid going home, terrified of what I might find waiting for me. My neighbors were getting creeped out too. Mrs. Henderson next door mentioned seeing a man sitting in a car outside our duplex at strange hours, just watching the building. The breaking point came on a sweltering July evening when Kevin and I were having dinner at Romano's, this little Italian place we'd been going to for months. We were sitting at our usual table by the window, talking about maybe taking a weekend trip to the lake, when Kevin suddenly went pale. He was staring at something behind me, and when I turned around, Brandon was sitting 3 tables away, just watching us eat. He wasn't trying to hide or be subtle about it. He was staring directly at us with this weird, satisfied expression, like he was enjoying some private joke. My appetite completely vanished. Kevin immediately stood up and walked over to Brandon's table, and I could see them having this tense, quiet conversation. Brandon kept shaking his head and gesturing toward me, while Kevin's posture got more and more aggressive. Other diners were starting to notice the commotion. When Kevin came back to our table, he was visibly shaken. "He says he has every right to eat wherever he wants," Kevin told me, his voice tight with controlled anger. "He also said to tell you that he's not going anywhere, and neither should you." We left immediately, but as we walked to Kevin's car, I could feel Brandon's eyes following us through the restaurant window. That night, Kevin stayed over at my place, and we barely slept. Every little sound, the house settling, a car driving by, even whiskers jumping off the bed, made us both jump. We knew this couldn't continue. The next morning, I made the decision that probably saved my sanity and maybe even my life. I called my cousin Janet, who's a lawyer in Cleveland, and explained everything that had been happening. She immediately connected me with a private investigator named Tony, who specialized in stalking cases. Within 48 hours, Tony had gathered enough evidence to file a proper restraining order. Photos of Brandon's car parked outside my house at various times, security footage from the school showing him lurking around the parking lot, even records of him calling my workplace multiple times under different names. The investigator also discovered that Brandon had been fired from his IT job in Columbus 3 months earlier for inappropriate use of company resources, which explained how he'd had so much time to dedicate to stalking me. The restraining order was granted immediately, and Brandon was served papers at his apartment. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Tony also helped me install a security system at my house and gave me practical advice about varying my routines and being aware of my surroundings. He assured me that most stalkers, when faced with legal consequences and the realization that their behavior was being officially documented, tend to back down. He was right about Brandon. The gifts stopped coming, the phone calls ended, and the anonymous texts to Kevin ceased completely. It's been almost a year now since I got the restraining order, and Brandon hasn't contacted me once. The investigator explained that guys like Brandon often move on to new targets when their current obsession becomes too complicated or risky. It's a disturbing thought knowing he's probably doing this to someone else now, but I had to focus on getting my own life back. Kevin and I are still together, stronger than ever actually, and I've learned to trust my instincts about people in a way I never did before. I still check my rearview mirror obsessively and keep my curtains drawn at night, but the constant fear has faded. What I want other people to understand is that this kind of behavior escalates quickly and unpredictably. If someone from your past reaches out and starts exhibiting obsessive behavior, don't be polite about it. Block them immediately and document everything. I wasted months trying to be nice, hoping Brandon would just lose interest and go away. The truth is, people like him don't respond to politeness or hints. They only understand clear legal boundaries enforced by professionals. I'm sharing this story because I want other women to know that they don't have to handle this alone, and they definitely don't have to wait until someone makes an overt threat to take action. Trust your gut, save everything, and don't hesitate to get help from people who know how to deal with these situations. Right. I need to tell someone about this because it's been eating at me for months now. I was 22 and had just taken this overnight job at a 24-hour gas station called Quick Stop about 15 miles outside Portland, Oregon. The place sat right off Interstate 84, surrounded by nothing but empty fields and the occasional farmhouse light flickering in the distance. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and honestly, most nights I'd see maybe 10 customers total. It was one of those gigs where truckers and random travelers would stop by when they needed gas or snacks at ungodly hours. The pay wasn't amazing, but I needed the money since I'd dropped out of college and was trying to figure out my next move. The station had this weird vibe to it, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, aisles that seemed too narrow, and this persistent smell of old coffee and cleaning supplies. The whole nightmare started about 3 weeks into the job. I was restocking the energy drink cooler when I heard the door chime go off. In walked this woman, probably in her mid-40s, with shoulder-length brown hair that had this frazzled quality to it, like she'd been running her fingers through it constantly. She was wearing a navy blue sweater that hung loose on her frame, and jeans that had definitely seen better days. What caught my attention immediately was how she moved, kind of slow and deliberate, like she was taking in every detail of the place. She grabbed a Diet Coke from the cooler and a pack of gum, but instead of just paying and leaving like most people do, she lingered at the counter, started asking me questions about how long I'd been there, if I liked the job, what my name was. Normal small talk, I thought, so I answered politely. Her name was Diane, and she mentioned she lived somewhere nearby. At first, I didn't think much of it. Diane seemed harmless enough, just another lonely person who probably didn't have many people to talk to. She'd come in around 1 a.m., always buying the same things, Diet Coke and gum, but each visit lasted longer than the last. She'd lean against the counter while I rang her up, standing closer than most customers would. Her eyes had this intensity to them, like she was studying me, memorizing every detail of my face. She'd ask personal questions that made me slightly uncomfortable, where I lived, if I had a girlfriend, what I did during the day. I kept my answers vague, but she seemed to file away every piece of information I gave her. The weird thing was how she never seemed to be in a hurry to leave, even when other customers came in. She'd just step to the side and wait for them to finish their business, then continue our conversation. The pattern continued for about 2 weeks. Diane would show up during my shift, always around the same time, always with the same routine. But I started noticing changes in her behavior. She'd compliment my hair or comment on the shirt I was wearing, remembering details from previous visits that I'd forgotten myself. One night she brought me a coffee from the diner down the road, claiming she thought I might be tired. I accepted it to be polite, but something about the gesture made me uncomfortable. The way she watched me drink it, with this satisfied expression on her face like she'd accomplished something important. She started positioning herself differently too. Instead of standing across from me at the counter, she'd move to my side, close enough that I could smell her perfume. It was this heavy floral scent that seemed to cling to everything she touched. Things escalated about a month after our first meeting. Diane had started asking more invasive questions. What time I got off work, which way I drove home if I lived alone. I kept deflecting, but she was persistent. One particularly slow Wednesday night, she stayed in the store for over an hour, pretending to browse the aisles while chatting with me whenever no other customers were around. She'd picked up random items, a bag of chips, a magazine, some candy, but never actually bought anything except her usual Diet Coke and gum. What really unsettled me was how she seemed to know things about me that I hadn't told her. She mentioned that I drove a red Honda Accord, which I'd never mentioned. When I asked how she knew that, she just shrugged and said she'd noticed it in the parking lot. The thing is, I always parked around the side of the building, not in the main lot where customers parked. The first time I saw her outside the store was on a Friday night in early October. I'd finished my shift and was walking to my car when I spotted her sitting in a dark blue sedan about 50 yards away in the parking lot. She was just sitting there, engine running, watching me. When she saw that I'd noticed her, she drove away quickly. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe she'd been waiting for the store to open or something. But the next week, she was there again. Same spot, same routine. This time when I got in my car, she pulled out behind me and followed me onto the highway. I thought maybe we were just going in the same direction, but when I took the exit from my apartment complex, she took it too. I made a few random turns to test my suspicions, and sure enough, she stayed right behind me. Finally, I pulled into a 24-hour McDonald's and she drove past, but not before I got a clear view of her face in the drive-through lights. The following week was when things got really disturbing. Diane had stopped coming into the store as frequently, but I knew she was still around because I'd catch glimpses of her car in the parking lot during my shift. She'd park in different spots, sometimes with the lights off, just sitting there for hours. I started feeling paranoid, constantly checking the windows and mirrors to see if she was watching me. My manager, Steve, noticed I was on edge and asked if everything was okay. I told him about Diane, but he just laughed it off, saying lonely customers were part of the job. He suggested I just be polite but firm if she made me uncomfortable. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one being stalked by some woman who seemed to know way too much about his personal life. The worst part was that I couldn't shake the feeling that she was learning my routine, figuring out patterns in my life that I wasn't even aware of myself. Then came the night that really scared me. I was driving home after my shift, taking my usual route through the residential area near my apartment. It was about 7:30 a.m., and the streets were mostly empty except for a few people leaving for work. I noticed the dark blue sedan about 3 cars back, keeping pace with me. When I sped up, she sped up. When I slowed down, she did the same. I decided to test her by taking a completely different route home, one that would add about 20 minutes to my drive. I turned onto a highway that led in the opposite direction of my apartment, thinking surely she'd give up and go home. But she didn't. She followed me for over 20 miles, through small towns and rural roads I'd never even been on before. My heart was pounding as I realized just how determined she was. I eventually circled back toward my apartment, but by then I was too rattled to go home. I spent the rest of the morning at a diner, drinking coffee and trying to figure out what to do. For the next few days, I varied my routine as much as possible. I'd leave work at different times, take different routes, sometimes even sleep at my buddy Jake's place across town. But somehow, Diane always seemed to find me. I'd see her car parked near my apartment complex, or catch a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror on roads I'd never taken before. The woman was relentless. I started carrying a small notebook, writing down every time I saw her, what she was wearing, what time it was. I thought maybe if I documented everything, I could prove to someone that this wasn't just in my head. The entries became a blur of dates and times. October 12th, 2:15 a.m., saw her car in grocery store parking lot. October 14th, 7:45 a.m., followed me to Jake's apartment. She was always there, always watching, and I was running out of places to hide. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night in late October. I'd finished my shift around 7 a.m. and was exhausted from staying up late the previous day trying to avoid Diane. I just wanted to go home, take a shower, and sleep. As I walked toward my car, I noticed the parking lot was completely empty, except for my Honda Accord. No sign of the dark blue sedan anywhere. For the first time in weeks, I actually relaxed a little bit. I drove home taking my normal route, not bothering to check my mirrors every few seconds like I'd been doing. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I felt this huge wave of relief wash over me. Maybe she'd finally lost interest. Maybe this nightmare was actually over. I parked in my usual spot and grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat, already thinking about how good it would feel to crawl into bed. But as I walked toward the entrance to my building, I saw a figure sitting on the concrete steps leading up to the main door. It was Diane, and she was smiling at me like we'd planned to meet there. "Hey there," she said, standing up as I approached. She was wearing the same navy sweater from our first meeting, but now it had stains on it, and her hair was greasier than usual. "I've been waiting for you. I wanted to talk without all those cameras at the store watching us." The way she said cameras made my skin crawl, like she'd been thinking about them for a long time, planning around them. I stopped about 10 feet away from her, every instinct telling me not to get any closer. She took a step toward me, and I could see dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping much either. "I know you've been avoiding me," she continued, her voice getting this weird sing-song quality to it. "But I figured out where you live. It wasn't that hard, actually. I just had to be patient." She reached into her purse and I tensed up, ready to run, but she just pulled out a folded piece of paper and held it out to me. "I wrote you a letter. I think we should be together. I think we're meant to be together." Her eyes had this glassy look to them, like she was completely disconnected from reality. That's when I realized I had to do something drastic. I pulled out my phone and started recording her, making sure she could see what I was doing. "Diane, I need you to leave me alone," I said, speaking clearly for the recording. "I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you following me. I want you to stay away from my apartment and my workplace." She looked confused at first, then angry. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "We have a connection. I can feel it. You feel it too. I know you do." I kept the phone pointed at her and started walking backward toward my car. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now," I told her. That seemed to snap her out of whatever trance she was in. She looked at the phone, then at me, and something shifted in her expression. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely frightened. She grabbed her purse and ran toward the parking lot, and I heard a car door slam and an engine start. I waited until I was sure she was gone, then called the police and my manager, Steve. The cops took my statement and the recording, and they said they'd patrol the area more frequently. Steve was apologetic about not taking my concerns seriously and agreed to ban her from the store. I never saw Diane again after that night, but I quit the gas station job 2 weeks later. Even now, months later, I still check my mirrors obsessively when I'm driving, and I always make sure my apartment door is locked tight. Started with a message on LinkedIn. I remember it clearly because I was on my lunch break, eating leftover pasta at my desk, when the notification popped up. The name, Eli Dorsey, meant almost nothing at first. But when I clicked the profile and saw his photo, something clicked. We had gone to the same middle school, though we'd never been close. He was quiet back then, one of those kids who always sat near the back, doodling dragons or skulls in the margins of his notebook. We barely exchanged words growing up, but his message was friendly. Said he remembered me from school and hoped I was doing well. At the time, I thought it was harmless. I had just moved to a new city for a job at a non-profit and didn't know many people yet. The idea of reconnecting with someone, even vaguely, felt oddly comforting. Our chat stayed light for the first few weeks. He asked about my work, recommended a couple of local coffee spots, and even sent a photo of an old yearbook page where our 8th grade science class had been crammed into a crooked formation for the group photo. I laughed when I saw it. It was the kind of thing that made him seem harmless, nostalgic, maybe a little awkward, but not threatening. But then something shifted. He started messaging more frequently, longer paragraphs, strange hours. One night, I woke up to 6 messages from him, all sent between 2 and 4 a.m. They weren't threatening, but they were strange. Stuff like, "Do you think people can be meant for each other without knowing it?" Or, "I wish I'd noticed you more back then." The kind of things that make you tilt your head and wonder what this person really wants from you. I didn't reply right away. I needed time to think about how to set a boundary without being rude. A few days later, I walked into work and stopped dead just inside the lobby. Eli was standing near the reception desk, holding a bouquet of yellow lilies wrapped in that crinkly clear plastic. He smiled like this was a normal thing to do, as if surprising someone you hadn't seen in nearly 15 years with flowers at their workplace was totally fine. My heart thudded a little too hard as I stepped toward him, forcing a polite smile. I asked what he was doing there, trying to keep my tone light. He said he was just passing through and thought it'd be nice to say hi in person. I told him I was in meetings all day and couldn't talk. He looked disappointed, almost hurt, but he nodded, handed me the flowers, and left without another word. I left the flowers in the break room and didn't take them home. Something about the whole thing felt intrusive, even if he hadn't said anything outright alarming. That same evening, I sent him a short message saying I appreciated the gesture, but I didn't feel comfortable continuing the conversations outside of a professional setting. I thought I was being clear without being cruel. He read the message almost immediately, then nothing. No reply, no reactions. For a day or two it was quiet and I figured that was the end of it. Then the calls started. At first it was just one unknown number around 11 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it the next morning, it was Eli. His voice was calm, almost sheepish. He said he was sorry if he came on too strong, that he just felt this connection he couldn't explain. I didn't respond. That day, I got 3 more calls from 3 different numbers, one from an out-of-state area code I didn't recognize. None of them left messages, but it was clear they were him. By the end of the week, I'd gotten nearly a dozen calls, each from a different number, each coming later at night than the last. On the 6th night, one of the voicemails was different. He wasn't calm anymore. His voice was shaky, almost like he was pacing while talking. He said things like, "You don't understand how hard it is to be ignored, and I just want you to give me a chance." The last line made me stop cold. "If you don't talk to me, I'll have to come see you again. And this time I won't leave so quickly." That was when I blocked every number I could, contacted our building security, and gave them his photo. I even told my supervisor everything, just in case he tried to show up again. What scared me most wasn't just what he said, it was the tone. Like he genuinely believed I owed him something, that we had some unfinished story between us, one that he was determined to finish with or without my consent. I started parking in a different garage, left work with a coworker whenever I could, and stopped going out alone. For the first time since moving to the city, I didn't feel free. Every buzz on my phone made my chest tighten. I kept the blinds in my apartment drawn even during the day. It felt like I had become a character in someone else's story, and they were the only one holding the pen. One morning, a letter arrived at my apartment. No return address, just my name and unit number written in jagged handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no envelope. It was a printout of an old photo, one I hadn't seen in years. Our 8th grade class at a science museum, all of us in matching t-shirts. Someone had circled my face in red ink. Underneath, he'd written, "I noticed you back then. I never forgot." That's when I realized this wasn't some passing obsession. It had been festering in the background of my life for years without me ever knowing. I reported it to the police, but since he hadn't made physical threats or harmed me, there wasn't much they could do beyond filing a report. I started researching legal options and ended up talking to a woman in my building who happened to be a paralegal. She pointed me to a lawyer who specialized in harassment and stalking cases. With their help, I filed for a restraining order. It wasn't easy. I had to show them the call logs, the voicemails, the letter. Even then, the court took its time. There's something gut-wrenching about having to prove that your fear is legitimate. Like you need to wait for something worse to happen before anyone steps in. But after nearly 3 weeks, it was granted. He was legally ordered to stay away from me, my workplace, and my building. The calls stopped. No more letters. No one lingering outside the lobby. The silence was eerie at first, like that moment after a storm when you're still waiting for the next crash of thunder. I didn't feel safe right away. I still looked over my shoulder in parking lots, kept pepper spray in my coat pocket, and double-checked that my windows were locked every night. But slowly, the tension in my body started to ease. It took months before I could sleep through the night without waking up in a panic. I don't think I'll ever fully go back to the version of myself from before this happened. But I'm here, and I'm okay. And that counts for something. To this day, I don't know what finally made him stop. Maybe the restraining order scared him. Maybe he found someone else to fixate on. Or maybe he realized I would never play the role he'd written for me in his head. I still have the letter. I keep it in a folder with the court documents, tucked in the back of a drawer I rarely open. Not because I want to remember, but because I never want to forget how quickly something can shift from strange to dangerous, especially when someone decides they're entitled to your attention. I never thought a harmless message from a quiet classmate could end in legal paperwork and fear, but here we are. What happened to me at my first job still makes me check my windows twice before going to bed. I'm 17, a junior at Phoenix High, and last spring I started flipping burgers at Quick Bite downtown. The place is exactly what it sounds like. A greasy fast food joint with cracked vinyl booths and that permanent smell of old oil. My shifts were mostly after school and weekends, standing behind the counter taking orders or manning the fryer in the back. The work was mind-numbing, but the money was decent enough for a first job. My parents were happy I was being responsible, earning my own cash instead of just asking for handouts. Most of my co-workers were pretty cool, other high school kids or college students picking up extra hours. The manager, Phil, was this stressed-out guy in his 40s who chain-smoked behind the dumpster and always complained about corporate breathing down his neck. The person who would make my life hell started on a Wednesday in May. Her name was Vanessa, and she was 24 with bleached blonde hair that she always wore in a high ponytail. She had this way of talking that made everything sound like a question, even when she was just stating facts. Phil introduced her as our new morning shift supervisor, which meant she'd be training me on opening procedures. She seemed friendly enough at first, asking about school and what I planned to do after graduation. But there was something in the way she looked at me that made me uncomfortable, like she was studying me instead of just making conversation. Her eyes would linger too long when she talked to me, and she had this habit of standing way too close when she was showing me how to clean the grill or restock the condiment station. Figured she was just being thorough with the training, maybe a little overly friendly because she was new and wanted to fit in. The weird comments started about 2 weeks after she got hired. She'd make these remarks about how mature I seemed for my age, how most guys my age were just boys, but I was different. When I'd mention hanging out with friends from school, she'd roll her eyes and say something about how high school kids were so dramatic and immature. She started bringing me coffee during my shifts, always remembering exactly how I liked it, even though I'd only mentioned it once. The other workers started noticing too. Marcus from the evening shift joked that I had a cougar after me, which made my face turn red. I tried to laugh it off, but inside I was getting more and more uncomfortable. Vanessa would find excuses to brush against me when we passed in the narrow kitchen, or she'd put her hand on my shoulder when she was explaining something that could have been explained from across the room. The breaking point came on a Saturday in June, when she cornered me in the walk-in freezer. I was grabbing boxes of frozen patties when she followed me in and closed the door behind her. The temperature was probably around 0 degrees, but I started sweating immediately. She stood between me and the door, playing with her ponytail and giving me this look that made my skin crawl. "You know, Connor," she said, using my name in this breathy way that made me want to disappear. "I think we have a real connection. I've been thinking about you a lot lately." I mumbled something about needing to get back to work, but she stepped closer and put her hand on my chest. "I know you're still in high school, but you're almost 18, right? Age is just a number anyway." I practically shoved past her to get out of there, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The rest of my shift was torture. Every time I looked up, she was staring at me with this expectant expression, like she was waiting for me to come around and realize how lucky I was to have her attention. That weekend, I told my parents I was thinking about quitting, making up some excuse about wanting to focus more on school. My mom seemed suspicious but didn't push it. Monday came and I dreaded going to work, but I needed the money too badly to just quit without notice. When I walked in, Vanessa was already there, leaning against the counter with this smug smile. "Hey, stranger," she said, like nothing had happened. I was hoping we could talk more about what we discussed on Saturday. I told her flat out that I wasn't interested, that she was making me uncomfortable and that I just wanted to do my job. Her face changed completely. The fake sweetness dropped away and something cold flickered in her eyes. "That's really hurtful, Connor. I thought you were more mature than that." The way she said mature made it sound like a threat. For the rest of the week she was different. Not obviously hostile, but there was this underlying tension that made every shift feel like walking on eggshells. Then the Instagram requests started. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, some random account with no profile picture, and a generic username like PhoenixGirl23 wanted to follow me. I ignored it, but the next day there was another one, then another. They all had different usernames, but the same empty profile, same lack of posts. I started blocking them, but new ones kept appearing. Some had profile pictures that were clearly stock photos of random women. One had the name Jenna AZ and claimed to be 19 and interested in meeting new people. The bio said she worked at a restaurant downtown and loved motorcycles and horror movies. Two things I'd mentioned to Vanessa during casual conversation. I blocked that one too, but it was becoming clear that this wasn't random. She was creating fake accounts faster than I could block them, and each one seemed to know little details about my life that I'd only shared with her. The situation at work got worse. Vanessa started scheduling herself on all my shifts, claiming it was for training purposes, even though I'd been there for months. She'd hover around me constantly, making comments about how I seemed distant, and asking if everything was okay at home. When I'd mention plans with friends, she'd suddenly need me to stay late or come in early, always with some urgent task that couldn't wait. She started leaving little notes in my locker, nothing explicitly threatening, just weird stuff like, "Hope you have a great day, someone's thinking about you," with way too many heart emojis. I kept the notes as evidence, though I wasn't sure what I'd do with them. The worst part was that she'd act completely normal around other employees, so when I tried to hint to Phil about the problem, he just said she seemed like a hard worker who was really dedicated to her job. By July, I'd decided I had to quit. I couldn't take the constant harassment anymore, and my grades were starting to suffer because I was so stressed about going to work. But then something weird happened. Vanessa suddenly became distant and professional. She stopped with the creepy comments, the notes disappeared, and she barely spoke to me beyond work-related stuff. I thought maybe she'd finally gotten the message and moved on. For about 2 weeks, everything was normal. Started to relax, thinking the nightmare was over. I even considered staying at the job since I really did need the money. That's when I made the mistake of mentioning to a coworker that I'd joined the new gym that opened up on 7th Street. I was proud of myself for finally getting serious about working out, and I thought the conversation was innocent enough. I had no idea that Vanessa was listening from the kitchen, or that she'd already found a new way to insert herself into my life. The gym was called Iron Phoenix, and I'd been going there for about a week when I met Amy. She was maybe 21, with short red hair and freckles, and she seemed genuinely nice. She introduced herself while I was struggling with the bench press, offering to spot me and giving me tips on my form. We started talking about workout routines, and she mentioned she was new to the area, just moved here from Denver for a job. She had this easy laugh and seemed really interested in hearing about my life, where I went to school, what I did for work, what kind of music I liked. It was refreshing to talk to someone who wasn't a high school kid or a stressed-out coworker. She always seemed to show up at the gym around the same time as me, and we'd end up working out together more often than not. Amy was encouraging without being pushy, and she had this way of making me feel more confident about myself. After a couple weeks, I started looking forward to seeing her there. But there were little things that nagged at me. Amy knew details about Phoenix that seemed odd for someone who'd just moved here, like which streets to avoid during rush hour, or where the good taco trucks were. When I mentioned Quick Bite once, she wrinkled her nose and said she'd heard the manager there was a real jerk, which was true, but oddly specific. She also seemed to know a lot about my schedule, always asking if I was going to be at the gym at certain times, like she was trying to coordinate our visits. The biggest red flag was when she mentioned that she'd grown up loving horror movies and motorcycles, the exact same interests that had shown up in those fake Instagram profiles. But I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe lots of people in Arizona liked motorcycles, and horror movies were popular everywhere. I wanted to believe that Amy was just a normal person who happened to be interested in me, because the alternative was too creepy to consider. The truth came crashing down on a Thursday evening in September. I'd gotten home from the gym and was in my bedroom changing clothes when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message just said, "Hope you had a good workout today," with a photo attached. When I opened it, my entire world tilted sideways. It was a picture of me walking out of Iron Phoenix taken from across the street. But that wasn't the worst part. The photo was clearly taken from outside my own house, because I could see my bedroom window in the background, and there was a timestamp showing it was taken just 20 minutes ago. I was still wearing the same clothes from the gym, and whoever took this had been watching me walk from my car to my front door. My mouth went completely dry and I dropped my phone like it was on fire. Someone had been following me home, taking pictures of me without my knowledge, and they had my phone number. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when I saw Vanessa's car parked 2 blocks away the next morning. It was this beat-up silver Honda, with a distinctive dent in the driver's side door. I'd seen it in the Quick Bite parking lot dozens of times. She was sitting inside, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, but I recognized her profile immediately. When she saw me looking, she started the engine and drove away quickly. That's when I realized Amy at the gym had never existed. It was Vanessa the whole time, wearing colored contacts and a wig, changing her voice slightly, and pretending to be someone else. She'd been following me for months, creating elaborate fake personas to stay close to me, and now she was watching my house and taking photos of me through my bedroom window. I called the police that same day and showed them everything: the fake Instagram accounts, the notes from work, the photo of me outside my house. They took it seriously once they saw the evidence, especially the picture taken from outside my home. Vanessa was arrested at work the next day, and I found out she'd been doing this kind of thing to other people before me. She ended up pleading guilty to stalking and harassment charges, and I never had to see her face again. But I still check my windows twice before bed, and I'm a lot more careful about who I trust now. My junior year of high school was when everything started spiraling. I lived with my mom in a 2-bedroom duplex on a quiet street near the edge of town. Nothing ever really happened there, just the sound of sprinklers in the early morning and neighbors mowing their lawns on the weekends. I had a part-time job at the public library and usually walked there after school. Life was predictable, which I liked. At that point, I just ended a 6-month relationship with this guy named Zachary. He wasn't violent or anything, but he had this way of always needing to know where I was. He'd get weird if I didn't respond to a message fast enough, or if I spent too much time with my friends. It got exhausting. The breakup happened on a Thursday afternoon behind the gym. I tried to keep it simple. I told him I needed space, that I didn't feel like myself anymore. He just stared at me for a few seconds, then nodded and walked away. Didn't say a single word. I remember feeling relief at first. That kind of heavy pressure on my chest had lifted. But that night, I got this feeling like someone was watching me when I was brushing my teeth. You know when the house is completely still, but your ears start picking up on things they normally wouldn't? I kept glancing toward the hallway like I was expecting to see someone there. Nothing ever showed up, but the silence felt wrong. The next day after school, I saw him standing across the street from my bus stop. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there with his backpack slung low over one shoulder, staring like it was completely normal. I pretended not to notice, but I kept checking from the corner of my eye. He didn't try to talk to me, didn't wave, just stood there like a statue until my bus came. That night I told my mom, and she said I was probably just imagining things, that breakups mess with your head. But then he started showing up in other places. Once near the frozen aisle at the grocery store, once parked a few cars down from the library. He never approached. He was just there. One evening I came home and there were muddy footprints on the porch. That might not sound like much, but it hadn't rained in over a week and we didn't have a garden or anything that would leave that kind of wet trail. My mom thought it was the mail carrier, but the prints didn't lead to the mailbox. They went straight to our front door, then stopped. I stood there staring at them longer than I should have, feeling this tightness in my ribs. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept waking up and checking the window, making sure it was still locked. At some point, I stuffed a rolled-up towel under my door, just in case. 3 days later, I noticed something strange with my bedroom window. The screen on the outside looked pushed in. Not torn or broken, just slightly bent at the bottom corner, like someone had tried to lift it and then stopped. I didn't tell my mom. She'd just chalk it up to wind or some kid messing around. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. I started double-checking every lock in the house before bed. Front door, back door, windows, even the garage. At school, I tried to act normal, but I could feel people staring. Word gets around fast when you break up with someone like Zachary. He was quiet, but people liked him. I started hearing things. Someone said he'd been skipping class. Another girl said she saw him just sitting in his car outside campus for hours. That Saturday, I was alone at home while my mom worked a late shift at the hospital. I had the TV on, trying to drown out the quiet, when I heard the doorbell. It was almost 9 p.m. I peeked through the peephole and didn't see anyone. Not a soul on the porch or down the street. I waited a full minute before slowly opening the door, just enough to glance around. That's when I saw it. On the welcome mat, a small, plain envelope. No name, no stamp, nothing written on it. I picked it up and held it like it might bite me. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was a photo of my house, from the backyard, taken from behind the oak tree that sat near the fence line. You could see my bedroom light on through the curtain. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in bed with the lights on, a baseball bat resting across my lap. Every tiny creak made my heart thud in my ears. I didn't call the cops. What would I even say? That my ex was maybe taking photos from the backyard? That he hadn't said a word to me in 2 weeks but just might be showing up like a ghost? There was nothing concrete, and part of me didn't want to believe it. Maybe I was overreacting, maybe someone else left that photo, but that didn't explain the footprints, or the screen, or the weird feeling that my room felt wrong somehow. Like the air was heavy, like it had been disturbed. The next morning I woke up feeling like someone had pressed pause on my body while I slept. I was groggy, my mouth was dry, and my pillow was oddly flattened, like someone had moved it. When I got up to make my bed, I found another envelope. This one wasn't outside. It was under my pillow. And inside it, a second Polaroid. A close-up of my face, sleeping, taken from a few feet away. My head was tilted slightly to the side, eyes shut, mouth half open. The blankets were the same, my necklace visible on my neck. It was a photo taken in that very room. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there gripping the photo, my body numb. My brain couldn't even figure out how to react. It wasn't just that someone had been in my room. It was the realization that they'd been close enough to lean over me, close enough to watch. Ran into the hallway and locked myself in the bathroom. That was the only room with no windows. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, barely breathing, trying to listen for any sound in the house. I kept replaying the night before in my head. Had I heard footsteps? Had I forgotten to lock the back door? I couldn't remember, and that terrified me even more. When my mom came home, I didn't try to act brave. I showed her the photos and told her everything. To her credit, she didn't question a single word. She called the police right away. They came, took the pictures, walked through the house, asked their questions. But there were no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. They said maybe I'd left a door unlocked. Maybe someone knew how to pick locks, maybe. They patrolled the neighborhood for a few days, but I never saw a single squad car outside. My mom had a new deadbolt installed that same week, and she let me sleep in her room after that. She even got a motion-activated camera for the hallway. But nothing else ever happened. Zachary never came around again. At least not that I saw. He stopped showing up near the bus stop. His car was never parked down the street. It was like he vanished. Some people said he moved to live with his dad in another state, but I never got confirmation. I didn't want it. Just the thought of seeing him again made my skin crawl. I changed my routines completely, got dropped off at school instead of taking the bus, quit my job at the library, stopped going out alone. That was the hardest part. I felt like I had to shrink my life just to feel safe again. To this day, I still double-check every lock before going to bed. I still avoid sleeping on my side, like in that photo. And sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I find myself staring at the door, just waiting for it to move. I never found out for sure if it was him. I never got answers. But the way that second photo was placed so carefully under my pillow, there's no doubt in my mind. Someone had been in that room, close enough to hear me breathe, close enough to lean in and take a picture while I slept. That alone is enough to keep me looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Senior year was supposed to be the best time of my life. I was captain of the debate team, had decent grades, and was already accepted to State University. I lived in a small town in Montana where everyone knew everyone, and nothing exciting ever happened. My parents both worked at the local bank, and we had this routine life that felt safe and predictable. I spent most of my free time at the library or hanging out with my best friend Madison at the old diner downtown. Everything was normal until Mr. Garrett started substituting at our school. He was probably in his early 30s, tall and lanky with this weird intensity in his eyes that made me feel like he was studying me whenever he looked my way. The first time he subbed for my English class, I noticed how he lingered near my desk when handing back papers, and his fingers would brush against mine just a little too long. It wasn't anything I could really complain about, but it made my skin crawl in a way I couldn't explain. The emails started about 2 weeks after his first day at our school. I remember it was a Wednesday evening in November when I got the first one. It came from an account called Admiring Words 47, just random enough to seem legitimate but weird enough to make me pause. The subject line read, "For a beautiful mind," and when I opened it, there was this long, flowery message about how I had caught someone's attention during debate practice. The writing was overly formal, filled with these elaborate compliments about my intellectual prowess and graceful demeanor. It felt like someone trying too hard to sound sophisticated, using phrases like "your eloquent discourse" and "the ethereal quality of your thoughts." At first, I figured it was just some creepy guy from school who had gotten my email address from the student directory. I deleted it and didn't think much about it, but then another one came the next day, and then another. Each message was longer than the last, filled with these weird observations about things I'd done or said that only someone who had been watching me closely would know. The third email really freaked me out. This person knew I had worn my grandmother's silver bracelet to school that day, mentioned how I dropped my pencil during calculus and bent down to pick it up, and even described the exact way I'd tied my hair back during lunch. The message went on for paragraphs about how my natural grace shines through even the most mundane actions, and how my intellectual beauty transcends the shallow concerns of your peers. The language was getting more intense, more personal, and I started feeling genuinely scared. I showed Madison the emails, and she immediately told me to report it to the school counselor. But what would I say? That someone was complimenting me too much? The messages weren't explicitly threatening, just incredibly creepy and way too detailed. I changed my email password and hoped whoever it was would lose interest, but the messages kept coming from different accounts. Thoughtful Observer 23, Quiet Admirer 91, Intellectual Soul. Each one had the same overly formal tone, the same obsessive attention to detail about my daily activities. During this time, Mr. Garrett kept showing up as a substitute in different classes. He'd sub for history, then science, then back to English again. It was like he was everywhere, and I started noticing how his eyes would follow me around the classroom. When I'd raise my hand to answer questions, he'd nod with this satisfied expression, like he was proud of me or something. During one particularly uncomfortable biology class, he assigned us to work in pairs and deliberately paired me with this quiet kid named Timothy who barely spoke. While we were working, Mr. Garrett came over and crouched down next to my desk, ostensibly to help us with the assignment. He positioned himself so close that I could smell his cologne, something woody and overwhelming that made me want to gag. He started asking me about my debate tournaments, my college plans, my favorite books, all while Timothy sat there awkwardly. His voice had this strange quality to it, like he was trying to memorize every word I said. When the bell rang, he told me to keep up the excellent work in this tone that made me feel like I needed a shower. The emails were getting more frequent and more disturbing. By December, I was receiving them almost daily, sometimes multiple times a day. The anonymous sender had started including quotes from famous poets and philosophers, weaving them into these long, rambling messages about my exceptional nature and how I was destined for greatness beyond the comprehension of ordinary minds. One particularly unsettling email contained a detailed description of the sweater I'd worn the previous day, a burgundy cardigan my mom had bought me, and how the color brought out the warmth in my complexion and highlighted the intelligence in my eyes. The writer knew I'd spilled coffee on it during lunch and had tried to clean it with a napkin. These weren't details someone could guess. They were observations from someone who had been watching me very carefully. I started feeling paranoid, constantly checking around me in the hallways, wondering who was studying my every move. The worst part was how the messages made me feel ashamed of existing, like my normal teenage activities were being cataloged and analyzed by some invisible presence. The breakthrough came during a particularly boring Friday afternoon in January. Mr. Garrett was substituting for our regular English teacher, Mrs. Thompson, who had been out sick for 3 days. He was supposed to be covering a unit on American poetry, but instead he started this weird lecture about the power of written expression and how true artistry lies in the ability to capture the essence of beauty through carefully chosen words. He was pacing around the classroom with this manic energy, gesturing wildly as he spoke. Then he started reading what he claimed was a poem by some obscure 19th century writer I'd never heard of. The words hit me like a physical blow. It was almost identical to a passage from one of the anonymous emails I'd received just 2 days earlier. He recited it word for word. "Your intellectual prowess shines like a beacon in the darkness of mediocrity, illuminating the path for those fortunate enough to witness your graceful discourse." I felt my chest tighten and my vision blur as the realization washed over me. This wasn't some random internet creep. It was him, standing right there in front of me, quoting his own sick messages to a room full of students who had no idea what was happening. The rest of that class period felt like a nightmare. I sat there trying to act normal while my mind raced with the horrible confirmation of what I'd suspected for weeks. "Mr. Garrett kept glancing in my direction as he continued his bizarre lecture, and I swear I saw the hint of a smirk on his face when he caught me staring. It was like he wanted me to know, like this was some twisted game he was playing. When he quoted another passage, this one about how true beauty lies in the quiet moments of contemplation, I recognized it immediately from an email I'd received just that morning. The coincidence was impossible. The writing style, the vocabulary, the obsessive attention to detail about my appearance and behavior, it all matched perfectly. I kept my head down for the rest of the class, pretending to take notes while actually writing down everything he said that I recognized from the emails. By the time the bell rang, I had a list of at least 6 direct quotes that proved he was my anonymous stalker. That weekend, I finally told my parents everything. My mom nearly cried when she read through the emails I'd saved, and my dad got this scary look in his eyes that I'd never seen before. We spent hours going through each message, comparing them to the notes I'd taken during Mr. Garrett's class. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just the identical phrases, but the same grammatical quirks, the same pretentious vocabulary, the same obsessive focus on my daily activities. My parents immediately called the school principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, and demanded a meeting for first thing Monday morning. They also contacted the police, though the officer we spoke to warned us that unless the emails contained explicit threats, it might be difficult to pursue criminal charges. Still, he took copies of everything and said he'd look into it. That Sunday night, I barely slept, knowing I'd have to face Mr. Garrett again and pretend I didn't know what he'd been doing. The thought of sitting in his classroom, knowing he'd been watching me, cataloging my movements, writing those creepy messages, it made me feel sick to my stomach. Monday morning came too quickly. I arrived at school early with my parents for our meeting with Principal Rodriguez. We brought printed copies of all the emails, my notes from Mr. Garrett's class, and a timeline showing how the messages had escalated over the months. Mrs. Rodriguez listened with growing concern as we laid out the evidence. Her face grew pale when she saw the side-by-side comparison of the email quotes and my classroom notes. She immediately called the district office and explained the situation, then assured us that Mr. Garrett would be removed from campus pending a full investigation. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with this lingering fear that he might retaliate somehow. During first period, instead of Mr. Garrett, we had a different substitute, an elderly woman named Mrs. Franklin who seemed completely normal and didn't make me want to crawl out of my skin. Word spread quickly through the school that Mr. Garrett had been let go, though most students didn't know the real reason why. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within a week, the district's IT department had traced the anonymous email accounts back to computers Mr. Garrett had used at various schools where he'd worked as a substitute. They found that he'd been creating fake accounts using the school's internet connection, thinking it would be harder to trace. The police discovered he'd been doing this to other female students at different schools across the county. I wasn't his only target. There were at least 4 other girls who had received similar messages over the past 2 years. The district fired him immediately and banned him from any school property. They also referred the case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges. I had to give a statement to the police, which was terrifying but also empowering. Sitting in that interview room, reading my emails aloud to the detective, I realized how much strength it had taken to recognize the pattern and speak up. The detective told me that my evidence was crucial in building a case not just against Mr. Garrett, but in protecting other students from his predatory behavior. The final resolution came 3 months later. Mr. Garrett was charged with stalking and harassment, and he eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and a restraining order that prohibited him from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of any school property. The district also implemented new policies requiring background checks and monitoring of substitute teachers' internet usage. I testified at the sentencing hearing, and seeing him sitting at that defendant's table, no longer the intimidating figure who had made me feel so powerless, was incredibly cathartic. He looked smaller somehow, deflated, and when the judge read his sentence, he didn't even look up. The other victims and their families were there too, and we all hugged afterward, bonded by this shared experience of surviving his manipulation. It was surreal to think that my decision to pay attention to those repeated phrases, to trust my instincts about the connection between the emails and his classroom behavior, had led to protecting other students from the same violation. The whole experience changed me in ways I didn't expect. I graduated that spring with a much deeper understanding of how predators operate, how they test boundaries, how they make you question your own perceptions, how they hide behind positions of authority. I also learned the importance of documenting everything and speaking up, even when the evidence seems circumstantial. The emails stopped completely after Mr. Garrett was arrested, and I never heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there somewhere, maybe trying the same tactics on other young women, but I take comfort in knowing that his conviction is on the record now. Any future employer or school district will see what he did. I'm in college now, studying criminal justice, and I often think about that Friday afternoon when he quoted his own sick words to our class. That moment of recognition, terrifying as it was, became the key to stopping him. It taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust that uncomfortable feeling in your gut. It might just save not only yourself, but others too.